without further ado, I would like to introduce to you our panel, the lovely ladies who deeply inspire me and that I'm really glad are on board with us tonight. Tonight we'll be talking about, Carla will introduce herself, Beth will introduce herself, and then Jay will introduce herself, and they'll talk about what they feel empowered as a woman traveling and touch on a couple of topics, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So there seems to be a bit of a lag on YouTube as to what's coming up on my PowerPoint. But I think it could be a good time to kick it off. Carla, I think the slide should be a couple of minutes behind. So if you wanted to, that would be awesome.
Okay, that's cool. Hello, everyone. I will say a little bit about my story. My name is Carla. I am from Brazil. And about 2 years ago, I started a women empowerment project in India called Project Tres, where I was teaching women different kinds of skills and providing them with sustainable jobs. Yes, you can go to the next slide, maybe. Yes, this picture.
There's a lag.
Yeah. So when I first got to India, which was exactly 2 years ago, I was just walking around and asking people if anyone knew women that needed help. This was after I left my job in Brazil. I had a career as a fashion designer. I worked for 6 years as a fashion designer. I had a very stable career and everything, but I was still not happy. I still felt that I could do something to help people. So I decided to take a gap year and I moved to California about 3.5 years ago, because at that point I could not speak any English. And I just wanted to know how was the feeling, of go out and travel a little bit and meet new people and speak a different language. So during this time, I got to the idea of this project that would be still using the skills that I had, but to help women. The reason why my focus was in women is because my mom, she suffered domestic violence a lot. Myself, I also suffered a lot of domestic violence from my father. He was really abusive, alcoholic, extremely violent. So I really felt that was very possible for me to try to bring women facing the same kind of issues some kind of hope. And this is what I decided to do. The reason why I chose India is because I knew that if I went back to Brazil, everyone was always going to give me the direction of what I should do, what I should not do. And I wanted to go somewhere where nobody knew me, and try also from the scratch. And this is when I went to India with Worldpackers, actually. I went by myself. I stayed first in a hostel and I was asking around. And the first person that I met was Farida, the one in the picture in the jungle with the blue plastic on the back. She was the first one joining the project. When I first met her, she was struggling with many loans. She was working 18 hours a day. And she was living in a metal hut in a jungle in India. And we started working together. First, we were just making necklaces out of wood. And after some time, she was explaining to me that she is a babysitter and she would like to have her own business. So during the time that we spent together, I was explaining to her what she should do about her business, how much people should actually pay her, so they would not take somehow advantage. And she started her own business. She was helping with the project as well. And we kept on moving forward. After Goa, where was the first location of the project, I went to New Delhi, where we were focused on our work with acid attack survivors. In India, this is something that happens more often than actually should be. And it's really hard for them to get jobs again. So I lived in a rehabilitation center for acid attack survivors. for about 2 months, and I was teaching them how to make some products. And this is Sapna in the picture. She is one of the survivors. She was 22 years old at this picture. And I think that we could go to the next photo. And so when we started, was just about making necklaces because was the most easy thing. But after some time, I was meeting some ladies that already had some kind of skills. They just didn't know how to make products to sell out of India. So I combined the knowledge that I had from design with their techniques, and we started making actually bigger collections and with different kinds of products and different kinds of techniques. And we designed many things like bags, pillowcases, backpacks. And after some time, we also started working with fair trade brands that would like to make ethical fashion, but they could not afford to go to India or to meet the artisans. So we were providing this kind of service to brands all over the world. And in September last year, I did an agreement with an NGO in Africa, which is called High Africa in Nairobi, Kenya. And we started a partnership with other ladies there and developing different kinds of other products. So I moved to Kenya in October last year. I was living in a slum area in Nairobi, teaching 15 ladies different handcraft skills. And that's it. At the moment in the project, we have around 35 artisans working with us. We have more than 100 kids getting education through the jobs or through sponsorships from people that supports the project. And that's it. Everything that we did so far, it's just because I decided to step out of my comfort zone and try something different. And it's not that it gets to a point that stops making you feel afraid. I guess that this will never actually happen. So my message to everyone out there that would like to go out and try to do something different is just like, be safe as much as you can. Talk to people before, search a lot of information on the internet, because nowadays we can really know a lot through the internet. But just go, try, and everything will be fine. That's it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so good. Thanks, Carla. As you can see there, it's a really great project, and it's something really worth investing some time into. I really encourage you to take a look at Carla's website, and especially at the videos, and really look to get involved. Now it's time for us to introduce our next panel member. Let's chat to Beth. Beth from She's Wanderful.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jess, for having me. And Carla, that was such an awesome story. And as you were talking, I immediately was like going on LinkedIn and going on your website, checking everything out. And so it's a really amazing what you're doing. And I feel very fortunate to be on this panel. It is an exciting journey that we're all on. And I'll start by telling you a little bit about my company. And Jess, I'll let you know when to advance the slides so you don't have to question yourself at all. I know I have a bunch in there.
No, that's perfect. Thanks.
Great. So I run Wanderful, and it is a global network for women who travel. Our goal is to really empower and to help women travel the world using what I think is our absolute best asset, and that's each other. And when I traveled when I started the organization, I was in actually a different place than how I grew up. I grew up actually hating travel, which is really funny now thinking about it. My mom was telling me this a couple of months ago. She was like, I never thought that this would be your career, because you used to just cry and cry every time you left a place. You hated leaving places. You hated leaving your home. And I never would have expected that you would run a travel company. But I think a few things changed. And so if you go to the next slide, you'll see there are two pictures, I believe, that are really the beginning of my own travel world. And that's when I was studying abroad. Jess, is the slide, were you able to advance the slide? I'm not seeing it in. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Thank you.
No worries.
I really started traveling in college when my family, which is from Portugal, I never really had gotten to know, and I never grew up speaking the language. And I decided in college that I wanted to change that. And so I went to live in Portugal and ended up staying there for a year. For me, who had never really traveled before that, it was real culture shock, which now I look back and I think it's so funny because for me now going to Portugal is like going to the restaurant down the street. You know, I know it so well, but I remember the first time that I went and how shocking it felt for me. When I finished my year in Portugal, that's when I think I caught the proverbial travel bug. And I ended up traveling to a country called Sao Tome and Principe off the west coast of Africa, where I was working at a school and ended up returning a couple of times to continue my work there. And I think that's when I started to realize that we as women have really complex and different experiences when we travel that at the time weren't really talked about. I think if you looked up women in travel online, the types of information you would find would be, you know, things like what's the best nail polish color to match my bikini when I go on my luxury vacation, and not so much the really deep and diverse issues that we face, whether positive or negative. And Jess, if you can advance the slide again, you'll see some of the different places that I've traveled around the world. You know, after hitting this travel bug, I started to go out into the world even more by myself. And every time I went to a different place, I noticed that I was still asking a lot of the same questions, but of course the answers would be very different depending on where I went. So I started to write about my experiences as a woman traveling by herself, with the questions I asked, whether it was related to safety or whether it was related to biology and, you know, how to find a tampon when you travel and how to use the local pharmacy, or how to expect to be treated as a woman in a place where maybe women have different experiences than what I had growing up. And I realized that there was an opportunity here not only to write about these experiences, but to actually take the knowledge that I have and the knowledge that you have and all of the different people from all around the world have as locals, and to tie them together and to connect them with each other, so that now if we're traveling to places, we can actually utilize the knowledge that each one of us has to make our travel experiences um, a little bit better and a little bit more connected. So the next few slides, you are free to just cruise through them at will. I believe there's 4 of them, and they're all pictures of our wonderful community. This is an image from the Women in Travel Summit, which is a conference that we started in 2014 to connect female travel bloggers together. And the next pictures that we have are from some of our chapter events. Now Wanderful is a community of 25,000 women around the world in 28 global chapters. The goal is to really connect women to one another, but also to empower them with the tools and resources they need to go abroad. And we have added in all sorts of products and services to that community as we've grown, from a really active Facebook group where women can share their questions with each other, to some peer-to-peer sharing activities where they can actually meet up or host one another when they travel, to a couple of trips that we've actually planned for women to go on together. And I think it's been a really fun and empowering experience for me to first see myself as kind of this woman going out into the world by herself. And then the more I travel on my own, the more I realize that belief of being on your own is completely false. In fact, a friend of mine earlier today was reading this book, and she pulled a quote that she shared with me because she thought it was perfect. In the book, the person, somebody comes up to the protagonist and says, "Oh, are you traveling alone?" And the protagonist says, "No, I'm not. I'm traveling by myself." And it was a very clear differentiation between being alone and being with oneself in the world. And I think when we travel alone, a lot of times we're afraid of, being lonely or being vulnerable. And it's actually, I think, a very strengthening experience and also a very connected experience, because you come to rely on the people around you, and you make friends very quickly, and meet people that you might not have met if you were kind of in the safe confines of a group or even a friend or a partner. So I found solo travel to be a really special way to get to know the world, and being able to connect other women together who love to travel solo um, has been a lot of fun for us. So I will basically say, my advice to anyone who wants to travel and wants to get out there is, don't hesitate. From a person who used to be dragged kicking and screaming out of her house to somebody who now cannot stop traveling no matter where she goes, I think you absolutely can and should go wherever you like to go, and do it with fearlessness, because the world is a really special place and there are people who are just waiting to meet you. And with that, I will also say that travel, in my experiences with travel, it doesn't have to be extravagant. We don't have to be sleeping in a hammock in Thailand, in the middle of nowhere, stay, like having this adventurous experience. Travel can be trying a new restaurant down the street, or going to a new region of your home that you are less familiar with, and just making yourself open to experiences and making yourself open to the unexpected. And if you go to the next slide, there's a picture of a trip that we did to Costa Rica, and we did it in partnership with a company called Woe Travel. And I think the thing I love about these trips are, people ask, "Oh, are these group trips, or are they, how are these organized?" And we say it's kind of solo travel in a group, because it's all these women who are coming in on their own and don't know anybody, but then they form these bonds with each other, and they make really great friendships. And we do these a couple times a year in different places. But ultimately, I say, whether it's by yourself or whether you find a group to go with, um, get out there, get out there and see the world. It's an amazing world, and you're going to love it. The next slide has information about us. If you do want to stay connected, we'd love to have you come and be part of our community. I mentioned we are a network of 25,000 women strong all around the world, and it's free to be a member, so you've got nothing to lose. You can visit us at sheswanderful.com and come check us out. And I think one really special part of being a part of our community is that you are giving as much as you are receiving. So when you become a part of Wanderful, you opt in to help other women as much as you receive that help in return wherever you travel the world. And so I'll say, this International Women's Day, just travel. Thank you.
That's awesome, Beth. Thanks so much for sharing all that with us. It's definitely true. I'm a big advocate of getting out of your comfort zone. And I really like the way you said it doesn't have to be like a trip forever and always on your own. It can be just facing an unfamiliar situation. And I really agree with that. I joined the Wanderful community last week, and I'm a big advocate of it. So everyone definitely get involved. Next up, I'd like to introduce you to the wonderful, beautiful, and ever so articulate Jay.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Right, I've loved everything that everyone has said so far. Like what Carla and Beth are doing, I think is absolutely phenomenal. And even when we were trying to get this webinar set up together, when I was researching She's Wonderful and Project Trez, I was like, okay, I gotta do a little better. These women are out here taking over the world, and I need to step up my game. So I absolutely love everything that everyone is doing. Right. So a little about Jay. As you can see from this very first slide, I travel as often as possible, and I'm sure Carla, you'll be able to recognize Escaleria Celarón in Rio. Thank you very much. Yeah,
Amazing.
so what I do is travel. Travel for me is life. It's part of my waking, my sleeping, everything that I work to travel essentially. So as you can see from a couple of the photos there, I have a disability. So I have polio and I contracted that in Nigeria. So I'm originally from Nigeria. And unfortunately, through unclean water, I contracted polio, and I had that before my first birthday. But I came to London at 5 years old, and I've been living here ever since. If you could go to the next slide, please. Right, so I'll tell you a little bit about who Jay on Life is. So my name is actually Jumoke, which is a Yoruba name from the Yoruba tribe of Nigeria. But I go by Jay for short. So I was born in Nigeria, as I mentioned, but I was raised in London. The very first time that I actually started traveling solo was when I was 18. So when I came to the UK, obviously I didn't have British citizenship. So a lot of my life was watching other people go to places, watching other people being able to take these trips, go on school trips, go on family holidays, etc. And I was always just not stuck in London essentially because there's so much to do here. But when you've lived somewhere for so long, you're just kind of like, okay, I'd like to see more of the world now. So when we did get our citizenship and my passport came through, I took the very first flight that I could, and actually I flew with Ryanair to visit a friend of mine in Germany for the grand price of 2 British pennies. That's right, back in the day when Ryanair used to do 1 penny flights, I got one of them. It was amazing.
Oh,
I know, crazy, right?
so good.
So good. I was so smug on that plane, but anyway. Um, right, so I went to visit a friend of mine in Germany, and honestly, I've never looked back since then because for me it was freeing as well, being able to travel, being able to see the world. And since then, I've been able to travel to 5 different continents, and I enjoy all types of travel, but I really, really love adventure and cultural travel. If we could go on to the next slide. So here's
Oh,
a photo of me actually in Rio once again, and I was paragliding over. Now you might have to correct me, Carla, but I think it's the Sao Conrado beach in Rio. But I had an absolutely phenomenal time, and for me, I seem to get this crazy buzz whenever I'm able to jump off of, or I don't know, out of, I don't know, a plane or paraglide, etc. So being able to do all these things and also being aware that yes, I do have a disability, but thinking to myself, if like I've got the ability to do so, I'm young enough to be able to do so, I have the privilege to have this passport that allows me to travel to all these countries without a visa and doing it while you're young and when you're able to. So I was like, okay, do you know what, I'm going to go for it. And then the next slide, please. This is another one of me
ah,
in this is in South Africa, actually, just outside of Cape Town. I went skydiving with that lovely little gentleman there. I believe his name was Fred. But for me, being able to travel despite my disability is incredibly important because while it is important for me to be able to travel and see the world, I think it's even more important for the world to be able to see me traveling, because there have been instances where there seems to be a sort of, it's never mean, there's no malice there, but there seems to be a condescension, like, oh wow, well done you. Like people are really surprised whenever they see somebody disabled traveling, and then that should tell you everything about the kind of world we live in. And I mean this in the West, in Africa, in Asia, because like I mentioned, I've been to a bunch of different continents throughout the world, that the world needs to become more accessible there needs to be a situation where it's not surprising to see somebody like me with a leg brace and crutches traveling around the world. It shouldn't be surprising to see somebody who is has a visual impairment, who might be deaf, etc. It shouldn't be surprising anymore, because if we enable people to travel more, then we're opening up the world. And I really do believe, and it is actually true, that disability is it's a great innovator. It's through disability that different creations and different innovations have been able to come about. So for, if we use example of the lift, it is obviously for those that are less able to walk. So those like myself on crutches, those that might be in wheelchairs. But who else is able to use that? Those with heavy luggage, old people, pregnant women, etc. So when we enable it for some, we're enabling it for everybody, because everybody is obviously able to benefit from that. So let me see. So the some of the challenges that I faced, I haven't faced them because I'm a woman, not that I've noticed, but because I'm a Black woman. And then obviously coupled with the fact that I am disabled, there have been times where I've noticed the travel industry, and also the if we want to get even smaller, the travel blogging industry isn't necessarily open to somebody like me. If you look on the Instagrams, etc., it's not somebody like me that you're seeing that's splashed about everywhere, that's inspiring you to travel. It's usually, what I've noticed is that if the traveler is Black, they're never disabled, or if the traveler is disabled, they're only ever white. And it just, there needs to be a bigger lens that we're looking through, that there are people from all walks of life, and traveling should be open to everybody, regardless of ability, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, etc. So while we're trying to open up the world, I think travel needs to be opened up a lot more, because it usually is the same faces that you're seeing over and over again. But I try not to let that stop me, because I mean, as you can see, I'll jump out of a plane. But I think the more that I travel and the more that people see me, those that have mobility impairments, those that might have invisible disabilities, etc., that you're able to, it's not something that's surprising. It becomes the everyday and it becomes mundane. And I think that's a point that we really do need to reach. Um, I think nothing in particular has ever, made me feel empowered as a woman, but I think women as a whole, all of us, are incredibly powerful and yet so gentle at the same time. I think through the things that we are able to do, things that are might be expected of us as society. So let's say you are a mother, but then you're also able to run a company and look after your personal life as well as your professional life. These are things that are taken for granted that women are expected to do, but these are the things that make us, so amazing. And then coupled with the fact that you are traveling to these lands that might be foreign to you, I think it's these things that we need to include in the scope of power and empowerment. Travel is empowering. And as Beth mentioned, every time that I've met a woman while traveling, I'm like, do you know what? I wish that I could stay here and hang out with you and actually be your friend, because you're able to broaden your horizons, but then you're able to do that with somebody that understands where you're coming from, that understands that, do you know what? It might actually be a bit of an issue if I'm up this mountain and I get my period. So, yeah, I think having that worldwide tribe is what empowers me most definitely. Um, I will say though, as a final point, that traveling, especially solo travel like I do, whenever I'm traveling, apart from a handful of times where I've gone with friends, I'm always traveling by myself. It's not easy. There are, I would love to say it's like, oh, there's no need to be scared. There are reasons to be scared. Like every single news cycle, there's something else that you're just like, whoa. But I think the most important thing to remember is to always travel safely. And I mean travel safely, like, one big tip that I think is useful for everybody is, regardless of where you are, if you are completely lost, you don't know you're up from your down, you have to have an air of confidence. You have to walk as though you know exactly where you are, as though if you took this next left, you know exactly where you will come up to, you know exactly where you need to be. And then if you are somewhere that has maybe like a McDonald's or a Starbucks nearby, they usually do have free Wi-Fi access. You might just need to, I don't know, maybe buy something small, or usually you just enter an email address just to be able to get even maybe 30 minutes of free Wi-Fi access. So then you can download offline maps, and those are definitely lifesavers. Unfortunately, I didn't think it through well enough to put all my social medias on there because, well, I'm an idiot. But yeah, my details are Jay on Life on all social media, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and on my blog, jayonlife.com. So if you want to find out what it's like for me to be a Black woman that travels with a disability and just gets on with it, do that. And then in this last slide, when I'm not traveling and flinging myself off things, I'm working with a lovely little lady to the far left over there in the pink/gray outfit. Yes, right there. Thank you very much. Her name is Mrs. Grace Alexander, and she has a charity called Star Children Initiative. And what they try to do is empower and advocate for those with disabilities from my home nation of Nigeria up to the age of 21, and girls and women of any age that have disabilities. Because I know that for me, living here is a big privilege. Certain things that I would never take it for granted, but certain things that you get used to, some people are not able to. And having a disability in these type of countries can be the difference between being able to get out of an abusive relationship or not being able to, because you feel like you have no way out. So yeah, I tried to save the world, and that's all I gotta say. Yay.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. I have a question for you, Jay.
Okay.
I'm not sure if this is like, too far in or whatever, but if you are traveling and if someone sees that you have a disability or you're walking with crutches, would you prefer to kind of go about things in your own way, or like at least like be able to walk down your path? Do you find it insulting if someone comes to try and help you, or is that come across as a certain way?
Oh, well, no, not necessarily. Like for me, I would always say if you see somebody, regardless, but especially, if that person has obvious and visible disability like I do. Oh, yay. Thank you so much. They'll have all my socials. Yeah, if you see somebody that looks like they might need help, then I would definitely say offer. Because I think sometimes, and I know with myself, I might let my pride get in the way, but if somebody offers, then obviously you are able to then accept the assistance. But I will say to people that do offer their help, if the person says no, take their no as a no, because then it can become condescending if they know within themselves that they're able to do it if you keep pushing. If they then, after saying no, decide to come up to you, is like, actually, I thought I had it, but I don't really, then you need to meet them where they're at. But you have to trust that they know their body better than you do. So if they say no, let it go. You did try to offer their help and they didn't require it. But yeah, I'd never be offended.
Oh, awesome. That's good to know. Shall we ask our audience if they've got any questions for our panel of experts?
Yes,
Otherwise,
please.
I'm probably going to dive deep and ask a couple myself. While we wait for them to come through, Beth, I'd love to ask you, what are the plans for Wanderful this year? Like, what are your goals? What do we have to keep an eye out? What should we get excited about?
Yeah, absolutely. No, we are growing leaps and bounds over here, expanding our team and also adding in a couple of new events. One of them is one I can definitely talk about. The other ones are still under wraps, so you'll have to stay tuned. But the one I'm very excited about is called Wanderfest, and it is a new event. So I mentioned that we run a conference called the Women in Travel Summit. It's done extremely well and grown to about 500 female travel bloggers and entrepreneurs every year. But the one thing that people have always asked for is, can we have an event where we just talk travel? And so we're putting together a kind of an international retreat for all of the women in our community to get together. We're calling it Wanderfest. We'll be launching it in the next month or so. So stay tuned, and we're picking a pretty cool destination that we can all kind of descend upon for travel workshops, different activities that we can do together, and then also working with our local chapter to have members of the local chapter actually showing people around and taking them on tours and helping them get to know their home city. So it's a lot of fun. And besides that, just focus on really growing. I think the perfect world that we have for Wanderful is that you show up in any airport around the world and there's somebody there who can pick you up at the international arrivals gate, or who can take you out for a cup of coffee, or even host you in her home for the weekend. And so that's what we're building right now this year. And everyone who participates in that goes through an identity verification process, so we can make sure that people are at least who they say they are, to add a little bit of trust and security to our network. So stay tuned as all that unfolds.
Oh my goodness, doing all that as a mother of a newborn too, like you
Yes.
are a
I know,
superwoman.
Beth is actually amazing. Although I will say though, not so much a question but a comment. I have seen the WI team because one of the bloggers that I follow, I don't know if you've ever met her, Olivia Christine, that does
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and then she went, and I was just kind of like, because obviously I'm live here from London, and I was like, oh man, I was like, it looks like fun, but I'm like so far away. And then to be able to take time off work and then figure out the logistics, the time zones, I was like, you guys do you.
One of these days we'll have to get you over to our side so you can come. It's a pretty, we were surprised. We've had people come from as far as New Zealand for the conference, and so it's always really special when people come from outside of North America.
My timing is just really horrible, unfortunately. So I'm up
no worries.
1 year.
One year.
We've got a question from Elizabeth. I don't know which one of my experts wants to take this one, but how do people who need daily meds make sure they get them? Oh, this is a good one. I actually have, my younger brother is a leukemia fighter. He's 23 years old and he's incredible. And he travels with the most ridiculous bag of meds. It's obviously such an effort for him to be able to travel in the first place. So I know that he for sure has to get them before he goes, but I don't know if you guys have ever had to get medications on the road. I remember I had to get the pill once. Like, I was in the middle of nowhere. I needed a new script for the pill and it was a nightmare. But what do you guys think?
Okay, well, I'll just start this off. As I mentioned, I have a disability, polio, but it's actually a stable disability. So I don't actually need to take any medications for it at all. But I would jump on what you did say, Jess, that I would make sure to get all the medication that you require beforehand, and also get a doctor's note as well, because some places are a little funny about that, because I know a British woman from here did have some over-the-counter pills, so something that you don't need a doctor's prescription for, and she got into trouble while in Egypt. So it's definitely something that just make sure that the airline, wherever you're going, that they know that you have this and you are allowed to have this. So I mean, that's what I think would be the best idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I think definitely getting it before.
Yeah, and I would just to add to that, especially when talking about things like the pill, as much as you can do in advance, I would say to do that. If you do need something while you're traveling, maybe you've forgotten or whatever, a couple things I would recommend. First of all, it's always good to walk into a pharmacy and see what people can do, to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes just being able to, explain even in like your gestures what you need can go a long way. I have also highly recommended, there are a couple of companies here in the US that we use. One is called Global Rescue. Another is called Ripcord. And both of those, and I know there are many other types of companies, but they basically do not travel insurance, but kind of crisis management protection. If you think about, as dramatic as needing a helicopter to medevac you out of a bad situation, but actually they do small things too. One of the women on our team has a really bad peanut allergy, and she downloaded an app from Global Rescue. And basically that app connects you to medical professionals that speak your language 24/7. So if you need anything, you can talk to someone in your native language who can help you. And they'll have information about what's available to you medically, and also get you access to help to leave the country if it gets to a point where you need to do that. And so I also recommend people to consider purchasing some of that if they're going to any place where it might be a little bit off the grid, or they're not really sure what's going to be available for them and they have medical needs. That will give you, I think the app that she has, you literally press one button and it just connects you automatically to a medical professional who can help you out. Amazing. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. And I don't think it's very expensive, as much as travel insurance costs, really.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great to know.
I had some emergencies while I was traveling because I lived for quite a long time in India, for example. So I even needed to go to a hospital. I had a really bad intoxication from food, like food poisoning. And I needed to go to the hospital and get treatment and get antibiotics and all. So if you can get a combo of a few medicines that that you can need, like, if you get any problems in your stomach or headache, the basic things, or if you're going to some countries in Africa, for example, you can take the malaria pills. If you can take this with you, I would recommend, because this is what I always did. But as well, if you need in any emergency, people are always going to be there and everything is going to be fine.
Oh, awesome. Cool. I hope that answered your question, Elizabeth. We got the thanks in the comments. So I think you've done a good job there, experts. It looks like we've got some feedback from Kirsten. She's going to be traveling alone for the first time in summer, and she's a little bit hard of hearing, so she's a bit nervous about that. Don't worry, I'm sure that your travels will introduce you to a whole plethora of new sounds. And then Roz, do you know of any groups for older women? We all look so young. Well, thank you for the compliment.
Thank you, Roz.
I think, Beth, you could maybe talk a bit about how, Wanderful, really, like the age demographic there.
Yeah, and actually, I will have to say, I regularly tell people that my face is the biggest weakness of the Wanderful community, because people see me and they assume that this is a group for 30-year-olds, and it's not. We have women in their 80s who come to our events regularly and participate. And actually, I think a lot of times it's those women who use us the most, because most of the women in our network are what I famously, maybe not so famously, but famously now call women in transition, which I also fall into the category of. These are women who are maybe haven't started a family yet or have a very young family, as well as women who have adult children or have recently gone through maybe a divorce or have retired, and travel is an opportunity for them in a way that it isn't when you have young children that are prohibiting you. Although I will always advocate for traveling for your with your children. It's an amazing intergenerational group of women that we have at Wanderful. And so I would certainly recommend you be part of our community, and you will be impressed. That being said, I will also say there are a number of great resources for women who are looking for a community of women who are retired or baby boomers. Evelyn Hannon of Journey Woman is one of my personal mentors and somebody I really look up to. I think it's journeywoman.com is her website. And she herself is into her mid to late 70s now, I believe, and has spoken at our conference before. And so I would start there, and she curates all sorts of great resources that you can tap into.
Amazing. I think just on that as well, I would like to add, I think, don't you guys, that there's a massive misconception that traveling as a woman and traveling alone and all these Instagram accounts that you have to be young and you have to go by yourself and go for a really long period of time, where I've definitely had friends myself who have met me traveling and said, Jess, you could sleep in a hut with trees. I can't. I need a bed. I need an I need a shower. And I think I completely respect that. There's very many different levels of comfort, and that's something that I think the travel industry needs to do better at, kind of proving to the world that we do that they can, I guess, accommodate different levels of comfort, different ages. And I think there are so many tour companies now that accommodate the most unique kind of tours and specialize in different things. It's quite exciting. Elizabeth said, do you have a place of traveling that you like best? Like a few days in one place at a time, or months at a go, or what? Carla, do you have a favorite place that you like to go? Do you usually like to go for a longer period of time?
Usually, yes. I always stayed at least a month in the places where I travel to. But as a touristic destination, one of my favorite places for sure is Bali. I really enjoyed being in Bali, and I think that everything is nice. I like the food. I like to go around. And yes, and I like a lot India as well. I love India, but I think that you need a lot of time there, I would say, because it's a very big country and it's a little bit hard to go around. So yes, Elizabeth, if you're looking for like a trip where you're gonna enjoy and rest and have nice food, I would recommend Bali.
Oh, Bali's so good. What about you, Jay?
Well, I definitely like to take my time because I actually did a study abroad in California in Long Beach, 562. And after that, I was traveling around the United States, and I only ever spent like 3 or 4 days in each place. And I was like, you know, I'd actually like to get underneath the skin of these places a lot more. So like Carla mentioned, I really think like a month is a good time. And I mean, I wish I could stay even longer, but a month is usually what I find that allows me to get to know a place. Because when I was actually in Brazil, I was there for a month, and I was able to visit 5 different places in that month, and felt like I wasn't rushing myself about. So yeah, I like to stay for as long as possible. As long as my visa allow, I'll stay.
Yeah, nice one. And Beth, you got like a favorite spot or a travel length of time you like to go for?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of favorite spot, especially anywhere new is a favorite spot for me. I will say, I think I come from a perspective, actually a similar perspective, but also different limitations. If I could travel long term all the time, I absolutely would. I think that that's the best way to do it. And when I say long term, I mean, a month plus. Yeah. Certainly being able to study abroad for a year was a very special experience. That being said, I am also subject to the good old lack of vacation time here in the US, where most people get, maybe 2 weeks maximum for the whole year. And so when we travel, you really have to make the most of it. And for that, I will say that I really try not to fit too much in. So no matter what my trip is or how long it is, even if I can only travel for 5 days, I try to limit my expectations so that I really can embrace and enjoy the place that I'm traveling to, and not feel like I have to go see this, and all these other things. And then I get back on the plane and I'm like, oh my God, what just happened? So the last trip that I took with my husband and our daughter, actually, we went to Spain, and we were only able to be there for a week, but we went in with zero expectations. We stayed in the city of Madrid, did 1-day trip out of it. And I think it was one of my favorite trips because we just sucked in the culture and just embraced going out to eat and, having coffee and sitting in cafes and just enjoying life, and not necessarily feeling like we had to see everything and do everything. So I would say, regardless of the length of trip, make sure that you have time to really just take a minute and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, like turn off completely, I guess. For me, I have a really hard time disconnecting from the world when I'm working and when I'm living my life. I feel like I'm always being criticized for being on my phone or near my phone, and that's not someone that I like to be. So I definitely like to travel to places where usually you don't have phone reception or no one can contact me. So I have an excuse for that to happen. Cool. Well, I think our time is up, guys. I would just like to say a massive, massive, massive thank you to everyone that listened in. Elizabeth, Julia, Roz, Simon, you guys, thank you so much for your questions. We're definitely going to keep this recorded up so we can revisit it. And like you three, oh my gosh, you're so inspirational. I feel like I could just sit here and chat travel with you for ages. I feel like we should almost start a podcast and we could just have a yarn.